Coming up on episode 45 of Creative Writing, we're talking about handling a crisis.
I can't go back to sleep, it's almost light. These restless thoughts have kept me up again tonight.
Hello and welcome to episode 45 of the Creative Writing Podcast. This is the podcast for writers and bloggers who want to build an authentic online platform without being smarmy. I'm your host, Kirsten Oliphant, and I'm so glad you're listening today. This episode, if you listen to episode 44, you will know that I recorded this episode actually a few weeks ago, and it was supposed to go up, and it didn't because my computer ate it. So we are going to actually be talking about that kind of crisis, which is a tech crisis, in this episode. Before we get started, I did want to say a couple of things. First of all, I loved hearing from you guys who listened to last time's episode, which was actually a recording of the Profitable Blogging Summit, one of my sessions there. And a few of you actually noted that I sound out of breath from pregnancy. And yes, I totally do, even though I'm really early on and I don't feel like I should be out of breath this early when I'm sitting and talking. I am. And so, yeah, you may hear that. And now I'm more aware. So I'm talking slowly, trying to breathe at opportune moments. But yes, I will probably get more and more out of breath as we go. And so that's a mini crisis. I don't know. There's no way to handle it. I'm just gonna be breathy. So anyway, that really just made me laugh to hear you guys recognize that. Yes, I am pregnant. I am breathy. So apologies. No apologies. Just something to be aware of. I am about to start a kind of 3-week to month-long dive down deep into audience building and finding your target audience, how to actually figure out who your current audience is, who you want your audience to be, and go after those people, creating content and connecting with them. So please stay tuned. We'll be talking some on the podcast about that. I will also be doing some live trainings and having some things on the blog, some posts and just different sitting out links with the quick fix. So you definitely want to be subscribed so that you hear about all of the details, because I think finding your target audience, it's huge. And it's something I feel like over and over again, I hear people struggling with. And for me, even though I feel like I know who mine is, I still struggle with this as well. And it shifts and changes, and I have to question, wait, is this in line with my target audience? Wait, who is that again? So anyway, I think this is going to be a really, really applicable series for you guys. So you definitely want to subscribe. You can find how to do that at creativewriting.com/subscribe. And that will get you hooked up to my mailing list. I send out an email once a week on Thursdays with links. It's called the Quick Fix. I have resources, and this month they're going to be dedicated to almost exclusively building your audience. And I'll also be letting you guys know about the live trainings that I will plan to do in that email. The other thing that I wanted to let you guys know is that I have been so thrilled about the community we are building over on Facebook. And I say community in a real way because we have a Facebook group, and I know probably many of you are already in Facebook groups for bloggers or writers, and they all have a different feel to them. And I think that I'll oftentimes, as the sort of leader of the group, you set the tone for that. So different leaders have, group administrators have set the tone for what the expectations are. But I feel like our group is starting to take on a life of its own that has to do with me, but more has to do with the members of the group. And I actually have one of our community members, Matthew McCarrick, taking over right now. And he has been leading the discussions while I work on finishing up a book and finishing some of the content for this audience building series. And it's been really amazing, the conversations that are happening. So it really is a great way to connect if you just want to talk to other people. And it's a very diverse group. Again, I always struggle with target audience because I do have bloggers and there are writers who write fiction, writers who write nonfiction, people just doing all kinds of different things. But it's neat because, someone will put a call out for beta readers and there's at least one person in there who's like, yes. And it's someone you may not expect, but it's just, we're forming some really great relationships. So if you want to join the Facebook community, you can find that at creativewriting.com/community. And one more web address for you. If you want to read the show notes for this and find some links to the things I will reference, you can find the show notes at creativewriting.com/045. Okay, so let's dive into how to manage a crisis. And I know a few years ago, it was actually 1 year ago, I went to AdventureCon, which was a conference for bloggers. And one of the speakers was talking, her session was about managing a crisis. And I remember thinking, I might skip this one because conferences, I'm an introvert. I love conferences, but I have to slip away because I can't handle all the learning, all the people, all the time. And so I almost skipped it. And I'm so glad I didn't. I just sort of thought, I don't have a crisis. This is really not very relevant to me. But it was very relevant, actually. And so if you're sitting there thinking, I'm not going to have a crisis, well, you might be surprised at the kind of crisis. And I say crisis, but it doesn't have to be a giant emergency. It could be large or small. But even people who don't expect to have a big crisis sometimes do. And so I'm going to talk about the kinds of crisis that you might have. And then also how to set up a plan in place and things you might want to consider when you're thinking about how you're going to handle it. Okay, so there are 3 main types of crisis that I would go ahead and put things under umbrellas of. And the first one's tech issues. And that is clearly, I found it really humorous that my first take on this episode was eaten by a tech issue. I don't know what happened. As I hit save, it was like there was a blackout and then everything came back and then all the words were gone. So it saved a completely blank audio file. It was amazing. But yes, tech issues, they're all over the place. You definitely, if you do not have any of the other kinds of crisis, you will have a tech issue crisis for sure. You've already had one. Raise your hand if your blog has crashed at like a very inopportune time. Yes, that's happened to all of us. A second one that has a few things under it is that you offend somebody or get somebody riled up on the internet. And probably many of us have done that. Sometimes you do it by accident. Like there are people who have accidentally, made mistakes on Twitter, and we'll talk about a couple of big examples of that in a little bit. Maybe you misspell a word and that one letter you misspelled creates a completely different and offensive meaning. That happens. So that's accidental. And then the other under this kind of umbrella of offending somebody is you could take a stance that is controversial and unpopular, or unpopular with a big group of people, and your post goes viral or, mini viral, whatever for you, and you start getting all these hateful comments and emails. So that may happen as well. And then the last kind of crisis is sort of an outside of your online world crisis, like a family or life crisis where someone's hospitalized or you're hospitalized or something major happens and you sort of have to disappear from the online world. We're going to talk about that one kind of a little bit less. An example of that for me was, I'm very, very connected with my people, especially over at my lifestyle blog. And when I get pregnant, people are really interested in all the things that happen and want to hear baby stuff. And we had a couple of births that actually none of our births have gone as planned. Even the ones where we had a C-section, we had to schedule, which was really just as an aside, that was the last way I wanted to give birth, but that's part of life. So anyway, even the planned, scheduled, here's your date of your C-section never happened. So every single birth we have had some kind of craziness. And there was one where everything happened so fast, there was no one to communicate, not just to my blog, but even to the people who had said they wanted to know when I was even in labor, that things happened really quickly. And I had not set up, a friend or somebody who was outside of the labor area with me, actually helping me to communicate with people. And so I had all these people when I finally had the baby and hours later got on my cell phone to see, send a few emails. I had like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of text messages from people who had seen me say I'm going into labor. And then that was it, because no one was updating anything and people were kind of freaking out. Like, is she dead? What happened? And so anyway, that's a small example of like a real life crisis where you might need to consider like how you are going to handle your online life when you have an offline issue. So let's start with tech issues. Super popular. We all have tech issues because we're in a tech world. And as much as I love all of the tech tools we have, I also hate them because they constantly fail us. So as an example, recently when we had the Profitable Blogging Summit, the night before the summit was to go live, I had all the videos edited and I was going to go actually put things on pages and get all the things organized. The blog crashed and there was no reason we could figure out. The hosting was fine because I have a shared dedicated server with a few people. They were fine. There was, I don't know, some kind of plugin issue. We never figured out what it was, but I ended up getting somebody to help me. A guy named Chris Lima, actually, who is, I don't know how in the world he took the time to help me. He's a pretty giant guy in the online WordPress kind of worlds. And anyway, somehow a friend of mine, Marie Osborne, thank you, Marie, connected me with Chris. And so Chris stayed up with me till like 3:30 in the morning, my time. He was in the West Coast, so it was not too late for him, fixing my blog and setting up the SSL certificate so that we could actually take payments and all these things that were just details that have been left to do before the blog crashed. And then when it came back up, it was midnight. But what happened as a result of some of this stuff being last minute is there was somehow a box left unchecked so that our blog, because we had the SSL certificate so you could sell things, and again, some of this may be over your head, just ignore the details if you don't get them. But in any case, what this meant was that when people actually went the next morning, they got the email, here's where you can watch the videos. When you went to the Profitable Blogging Summit site, this giant window popped up that was like, people are trying to steal your data. This is an unsafe site. You should not enter. Fantastic. Just what you want when you have like 2,000 people heading over to a site to watch some videos. So I woke up to hordes and hordes of emails from people and messages in our Facebook group. And anyway, it took us probably half a day to figure it out. And Stephanie Jones of Journey.com figured it out for me and got this box unchecked. But until then, I had people every hour who were not reading the email I had sent out afterwards saying, hey, you can just click through. The site is totally safe, because you could just click through, but it was not obvious that you could click through. And I posted in the Facebook group and still people didn't see the post and were posting in there. Anyway, it was just basically I spent an entire day answering emails, and it was really insane. So that's a tech issue, and it was super frustrating for me. So when you have tech issues, because you will, I think the important things to know is that you have to have somebody on your side or kind of on call. You don't have to have some of us design our own blogs. I mostly now, and with WordPress, can set up an entire blog all by myself. And I usually get to a point where there's something I can't do. And I have a friend, Stephanie Jones again. She also just started Good Blog Groupie, Groupie, which is a great site for design and development. And anyway, she is somebody that I can email or Facebook message and be like, help, I broke my blog, and she will help me. I also had Elaine Griffin of Elaine Griffin Designs who helped me with the first blog I put on WordPress, and she was the same way, that I could email her and be like, yeah, my blog is broken. So you need to have somebody that you can reach out to or find that has some tech knowledge in case something like that happens, that might be able to help you, or hopefully customer support if you're having like an issue with email or something else. And that's where that customer support really comes into play. Like, for example, MailChimp, if you're on the free account, you will not get customer support. That's a really, really big thing to know, because so many of us use MailChimp because it's free for the first 2,000 people. Well, if you have a crisis with MailChimp, you will not get help unless you upgrade to a paid plan. And that's something important to know. I mean, we probably don't have email crises that often, but if you do, you want to be able to get somebody who can actually talk to you or who's willing to do that. So you need to have some kind of support in place. And then the other thing is how you respond to that. So for me, I tried to turn what was just a super frustrating, horrible situation to me with the Profitable Blogging Summit into something that would help me build lasting fans. And so what I did is I did send out an email, and I tried to use humor. I used humor, and I put in a meme from Mean Girls and just made some funny statements about the whole thing, but also profusely apologized for the fact that it happened and kind of explained what happened. But I did use humor. And then I also extended with the days to watch the videos were limited time. So I gave an extra day. So you also, if you have a tech issue with something that's like an event or something that's paid, you may want to consider whether you need to actually offer a refund, offer an extension on something, or a discount if it's related to a paid thing. But with tech issues, you just have to breathe, because you're going to have them. So like if you delete your blog, breathe, and hopefully someone can restore it for you. And if not, I've deleted a blog. It was awful. I've been there. Call me. I can totally commiserate with you. But, whatever your tech issue, have someone on hand who can help you. And then also have a plan in place and try to make the very best of the situation, because you can't fix it sometimes. Sometimes you just have to wait it out, or wait till your developer or someone who is tech savvy can get in there and fix it. And you can try to do the best you can to get people on your side and just handle the crisis in a way that people see and will be drawn to. And so I hoped to do that. The other thing that's super important during a crisis is to have a way to contact your people. For me, that's email. I know Pat Flynn talked about this when his blog, he had a vicious attack a few years ago on the Smart Passive Income blog, and the whole site was down for maybe 5 days. But he had his email list, so he could contact his people and still, try to make some sales, because he lost a lot of money. When his site goes down, he loses a whole, I think it was thousands of dollars. So have a way to contact your people. Maybe that's your Facebook group. Maybe that's your email. Email is more lasting. And maybe your issues with email. Then you want another way to contact people if you can. So let's move on to offending people. And oh My goodness. So I'm recording this. If you're listening live, or not live, but if you're listening this week, if you're listening later, this is the week where the child fell into the gorilla pit at the Cincinnati Zoo. I'm not even going to get started on how I feel about the different nuances of that situation, and more so even about the reactions afterward. But that is a huge thing that happened this week. And there are people offending people all over the internet. And you have seen the rise of the internet mob. It is really, really easy to make people angry these days. And because we're on the internet, we feel this layer of safety that we can talk to people in a way we wouldn't talk to them in real life. We can say things and act in a way we wouldn't act like in real life. And so if you do something wrong, if you take a misstep on the internet, you will be under so much fire. And this is where, people always want to have a viral post and have all this traffic. And sometimes I'm kind of like, I would just take a medium amount of traffic, because if you do something wrong, whether it's, offending somebody by accident or choosing an unpopular stance, the more eyes on your blog, the more likely it is that you're going to have more fire hitting you. Okay, so let's talk about accidental first. Okay, so the Red Cross was doing some work, I think in Haiti, and somebody who was in charge of the account actually accidentally posted something to the Red Cross account that was supposed to go to their personal account, and they talked about getting drunk. So clearly that caused quite a firestorm. It was an accident. They were supposed to be tweeting on their personal account, and instead it was on the Red Cross account. That's bad. And the Red Cross, here's how they handled it. They deleted it. They made a tweet, and I'm going to read it because it's just really funny. I really liked how they responded to it. So they said, "We've deleted the rogue tweet, but rest assured the Red Cross is sober and we've confiscated the keys." So they used humor to kind of handle that, but they also apologized, and it was made clear it was a rogue tweet. They said a lot in a few characters. I bet it took a long time to compose that tweet. The neat thing that came out of that was the brand of beer that was mentioned in the rogue tweet actually made a tweet out to its followers to support the Red Cross, and they ended up making a whole bunch of money. So they turned around a situation that could have been really bad had they handled it in a different way, and they turned it around for good. So I think there's a time and a place. Humor does not always work. If you have done something really horrendous, humor does not work. You really have to sit and think about the situation. Is it something that needs a sincere and, compassionate apology to people that's just straight up? It may. Or can you cover with some humor? Because humor does go a long way if done well. And that's one of those cases where I might have a few people check before you respond. Like, okay, hey, how does this response say before I tweet it? How does this sound to you? Does this sound apologetic enough? Is this actually funny? Would this work? So you want to have kind of think about how you're going to respond. And if you've done an accident, you just really need to, you need to apologize. But you need to consider if you can, cover it with humor, or if it's something that you really need to be very sincere about. And I think whenever you apologize, whether it's, this or something else, you just don't blame other people, because the worst kind of apology is that one where you're like, either I'm sorry you're offended by my comment. No, that's not an apology. Or the one where you're like, I'm so sorry, my assistant, so ridiculous. If you start to just parcel out the blame and try to explain it away, people smell that and they really don't like it. So be an adult and take the responsibility. Even if it was your assistant, you're the face. You need to take responsibility. And so you need to think about whether you need to do that sincerely with humor or with some other kind of response. And do ask people first, because what seems like an appropriate response to you may not be to other people. So definitely ask first. So if you offend people because you're taking a controversial stance, and that is just a totally different thing, you have to understand if you are going to speak out about something, even people who have spoken out this week about the situation with the gorilla have taken heat, whatever they said, you'd have to pick your battles. It's like with my kids. I don't want to make every single thing a battle. I want them to know I'm in charge. I'm the parent, but we're not going to make everything a battle. Like, for example, hair with my daughter. My older daughter, Cooper, does not want anyone to fix her hair. It's in her face all the time. She does not want people to fix it. I am not making that my battle. There are times where I do tell her, okay, for this, I'm putting your hair out of your face and you do need to sit still. And I pick it as a battle that moment. But daily, from day to day, her hair is not the battle I'm going to pick. And I've chosen that. And you may choose something different with your kids, and that's okay. So you need to choose your battles also with your blog and your online presence. I have chosen a few battles, even on my parenting blog, that I will not address. I will not talk about vaccines. I will not talk about there was a few other things I actually have said. Now I can't think, but that's a big one. We don't talk specifics about discipline. There's certain things that we're not going to address, that I'm not going to jump into the fray about. And I think it's important, so my offensive thing is I do often talk about my faith. And to me, that's offensive enough to talk about faith because that turns some people off. And I do feel like, okay, this is the battle I'm going to pick. I don't always talk about it. And when I do talk about it, those are the posts I write with a lot more care. Often I will have someone else look at them because I have a lot of readers on my blog who do not have the same faith that I do. And so if I'm writing a post, I'm very aware they're in my audience and I want to make it a post that is okay for them to read. That does not mean my faith at some point won't offend them because that's just the reality of when we have different beliefs. But I don't want to make it extra offensive by the way I present it or how I'm doing it, or if I'm writing as though I'm writing to only people who share my faith, because that would be offensive even if I didn't mean it. So you have to decide, okay, which are your battles? That's my thing where I might really offend people, and I might offend them with some other opinions I have, and that's fine. But typically I'm a very much like parent as it works for you kind of person. But there are a few hot button issues, again, like vaccines, where I'm not even going to address it. However I feel about it, I'm not going to tell you. And so that's not a battle I want to choose. You need to think about those beforehand. So if you're going to push publish on a post or toss out a tweet, you need to think about actually beforehand, is this somewhere I really want to take a stand? Is this a hill I want to die on? It may or may not be. So think about that beforehand. And again, if you're offending people, you have to decide ahead of time how you're going to handle that when you do have the firestorm. If you know there's going to be a firestorm that comes down on your head for writing about what happened at the Cincinnati Zoo, you need to be prepared for that and think about, okay, am I going to close my comment section? Am I going to keep it open but not respond to criticism? Am I going to respond to criticism? And a few things about that. That is something that's really important for you to think about ahead of time with all of the, kind of ideas of a crisis. What is your response? Are you more personal? Are you more professional? Will you have your assistant do it? Are you going to be more in the fray of saying, I'm sorry every single time? And I want to give two examples of brands that I think handled, one was a negative crisis and one was a positive one, but how they handled this in the moment and really quickly. And the first is Yellowstone. Before we had everybody upset about the gorilla, which really was sad that this gorilla died, at whatever else you feel about it. Before that, we had the bison in Yellowstone, and a family put the baby bison in their car, and then the herd wouldn't take it back and it kept going in the road, and so they euthanized it. And the story made headlines before even people knew that the animal had been euthanized, and then the Yellowstone was actually the one who announced that happened. I don't know what they were thinking. I think maybe they were trying to impress on people the importance of not messing with the wildlife, but people were outraged that that's how the situation were handled. They were calling for Yellowstone's head. They were trying to understand why Yellowstone couldn't have sent it somewhere else to all the different rehabilitation places. So Yellowstone's response, and I read all the comments, Yellowstone's response was that they had one canned answer that they had, and sometimes a canned answer, and by that I mean an answer you compose ahead of time and then respond over and over again. Sometimes that can be effective, like an email. It is not as effective in a Facebook thread of comments where you copy and paste the same answer again and again and again, especially because the answer was, it was not, I don't want to say not human, but it did not take into account human emotion and how people feel about animals. It was very cut and dried, very textbook, very unemotional. And so for all of these people who are emotionally upset and devastated, even some of them, about this animal being killed, to copy and paste the same sort of robotic answer was a really big fail on their part. It just made people angrier. It made the brand not seem human. And I know Yellowstone's not a brand, it's a park. I'm not even disagreeing with what they said and their reasons for doing it, because that's just how Yellowstone works. And you can go, I'll leave a link to this as well. But the way that they handled that, I don't think took into account enough human emotion. And I really think it should have. And this is one of those times where you just need to look at the situation. And on the opposite side, Kohl's had a really good sort of crisis, because maybe crisis isn't the right word, but they had, as you guys know, the woman who wore the Chewbacca mask and had this crazy, the Facebook video that has been viewed the most times ever, or Facebook Live video, and she put on the Chewbacca mask and laughed, and it really was a hilarious, joy-filled, really fun video. And it got viewed and passed around and went viral. And it's just some mom in her car. And Kohl's, because that's where she bought the mask, and she mentioned Kohl's, within like a day, they had contacted her. they had gone to her house and given her like hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of toys and products and Star Wars things, taken a video and posted on their brand. They saw an opportunity, they saw something happening, and they responded quickly, and they responded in a correct way. And I loved how they handled that. And I thought that that was really good. Again, that was a good crisis, but they took the time to be hasty and to do something really good, really fast, and to capitalize. Because sometimes these crises, they don't last long. And maybe it's a good crisis or maybe it's not, but you do need to be quick, which is why you may need alerts on your phone. You may need somebody watching out for you. I actually had a time where one of my posts about roller derby, where I was really offended by someone's remark that was very just sexist and sexual in front of his daughter about roller derby and how we should wear stripper clothes. Anyway, it really offended me. And I wrote a post about how roller derby skaters are not strippers on skates. And I offended apparently a bunch of people who are strippers who do derby, which is fine. But what I meant literally, and I stand by this, is that it is a sport. It is not an activity for men to watch and get titillated. That's not what it is. And that's what my post was about. So an image from that post, which says, roller derby, we're not strippers on skates, and had a picture of me skating, got passed around. It got separated from my post, even though my web address for my site was on the bottom. It got separated from the post, passed around Pinterest, just linked to the image file, not to my post or talk about it. Then got put on Twitter, and I woke up one morning and someone finally had the decency to go to my site and tag me, but there was a whole conversation talking about how I was slut shaming and all of this other stuff. And I was able, because someone finally tagged me, to go in there and kind of speak into it and be like, hey, there's an actual post that goes along with this. I understand your points, but if you take this picture in the context, you're wrong about what you're saying, essentially. And it turned it around for good, I guess. I mean, as good as you can get. Really, they're strangers. They're not people who are going to read my blog often, but I did get them to stop calling me a slut shamer on Twitter, which was good. But it's important to find out that these are even happening. And so, you want to have somebody watching your back. You want to have alerts on your phone or something where if a crisis happens, you are aware of it in a timely manner. So I'm going to finish up with a few things that you need to think about when it comes to crisis, because we do need to prepare. And as I said, I'm not really going to address the outside of online world issue. I would just say that you need to have a few people who have your passwords to things that you could text and be like, hey, can you post this? That's about as detailed as you need to be there. So you need to think about, are you going to respond to haters? Whether that's on Twitter or comments or somewhere else. Will you delete comments that are nasty on your blog? Will you respond to them? One thing I would not do is to try to get your people riled up and fighting your battles for you. That creates an online mob. I've seen people do this and it's not good. They'll post in a Facebook group, hey, somebody's attacking me on my blog who wants to go comment, and people run over there and then attack that person. No, don't do that. Handle it yourself, please. Think about the tone you should take. And again, that's going to be situational. Have the alert so that you can handle things in a time-sensitive manner. Yes, you should take time to compose a tweet before you respond on Twitter to something, but you also don't want to take 2 days if there's something that's immediate. You want to get right in there. So there's a lot we can learn from some different social media fails, and I'm going to put some of those on there, but we are all going to have crises of varying degrees. You need to consider ahead of time what your plan is. Think about overall how you tend to respond. And then again, thinking of Yellowstone, think about how you're going to handle that particular situation. Each situation. Are you going to handle it like a robot and be professional? You should be professional, but you could be professional and use humor, I should say, and be personal. But are you going to address the emotion? Are you just going to copy and paste canned responses, which again is a good way to handle email? Like for the Profitable Blogging Summit, I realized halfway through the day I should just copy and paste the same email I sent to everybody. Lesson learned too late. But it is a good idea to have canned responses. It's a good idea to have somebody on call. You are going to have a crisis, big or small, that's going to drive you crazy until you get it resolved. So going into it with a plan makes it a lot easier to handle. So that's what I have to say about crises. I'm going to leave some links to some really interesting things in the show notes. Again, that's createifwriting.com/045. I'm really excited about the audience building series that I have coming up. So I really hope you subscribe to my mailing list so that you will get all the details about what we're going to be up to this month. As a thank you again, Jasmine Commerce from JasmineCommerceMusic.com has done the music for this show, and she has a really great Facebook page where she's doing live video Beautiful voice, beautiful girl. Definitely go check her out. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for the music for the show. I hope you guys connect with me. I want to connect. You guys are my audience. I love knowing my audience's names. I love knowing who's listening. So definitely reach out to me. You can always email me, kirsten@kirstenoliphant.com. You can always connect on Facebook, creativewriting.com/community. So go out, prepare for your crises before they happen, because they're going to happen. And then you can share in the comments maybe what your plan is or how you've handled a crisis in the past. I'd love to hear about that. So prepare for your crisis, and I hope you have an inspired week.